business owner and investment advisor in Fargo. And I just got on the authority 3 months ago.
Mike Haugen, I've been on the authority for 3 years and retired.
Tammy Lynn, I've been on the authority then for 2 years, and I was a city commissioner in Arizona and dealt a lot with our airport there.
I'm Eric Lind. I've been on the authority for 1 year.
I'm Stacy Bossert. I work as their counsel.
I'm Eric Johnson, the city attorney for Fargo.
Jill Manette, the Director of Human Resources for the City of Fargo.
I'm Kent Costin, the Director of Finance for the City of Fargo. I've been here 32 years.
And Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
I'm Dave Pepcorn, I'm Fargo City Commissioner, and I've been the liaison for 1 year.
And I think Commissioner Garrick is in the audience as well. Just, I think many of you know him. He was the liaison before as well. And we have some past board members as well. Well, thank you for coming today. No, it was hard to get our schedules at all work, but we'll try to get through this. What I'd like to do is do a presentation, and I have different staff members doing different parts of the presentation. And then when they're done with the presentation, we'll open it up for questions. I think that'd be the easier way to do it because there will probably be some questions of what's going on. And to be fair, if there's any public or press here, you guys have not seen anything so far. Tammy Lynn and General Haugen retired had seen at least the compensation part of the discussion, but have not seen any of the other MOU discussions. As we all know, Hector International Airport is a vital component in our continued success in the Fargo-Moorhead metro community. Economic development knows it, we know it, we all know it, it's important to have that. It's wonderful to see when we see the tonnage of freight going through the airport has almost gone up 5 times in the last several years. And our boardage for people going in and out of the city is great. We seek a collaborative, successful partnership with the airport authority and the municipal airport and how we work things together. Now, when we go forward on the Memorandum of Understanding, which in 50 years since the Airport Authority was established, we've kind of had a loose MOU, and it's come to us that we should try to figure this out. So regardless of me as mayor or who our appointed positions are, I'd like to have us try to put our motions to the side today and try to figure out a way to come about with an MOU that works well for both entities. Not trying to usurp any authority or not trying to pull anything away from people, just would like to have a good working type of understanding between the two entities that will work well after we're gone. So the city acknowledges the airport's recent diligence on issues pertaining to the Delta Global Services, and I hear it's on your agenda from tomorrow. We have heard a lot from the community in regards to that, two of the commissioners, so I'm very happy that you're going to address that, and I hope you guys make some progress in that area. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So together working as a team, I think we can accomplish far more than if we fight or have difficulties between the two entities. So Eric is going to go, Johnson is going to go through a review of what was given to us by your team, and then we're going to go through what we would come back with a recommendation as far as the Memorandum of Understanding.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Again, Eric Johnson, the city attorney for Fargo, and I've been interacting over the last couple of years now, whereas we've been having this dialogue with Stacy, and we've had a good relationship as we have for many years. First of all, I decided to lay this out, pardon me, but some of this I laid out just for, I wasn't sure who was going to be here completely. I knew the airport authority would know much of this, but I'll just kind of walk through everything, and forgive me if I'm telling you something you already know. But first of all, just exchanged some proposals back and forth over the span of some time here. Yours came to us in mid-January, and we tried to analyze that rather much in depth, and that took some time to do that. Let me start with sort of a synopsis of what your agreement provided. As you've been saying for a little while, you want, there's no question that the airport authority has autonomy, has the authority to make decisions about the airport. You own the land. Those things, I think, have been maybe the subject of some confusion, like there was a dispute about it. There isn't any dispute in the law about that. And you have the authority to employ your employees. But the question was just, okay, for the last 50 years since the origin of the Municipal Airport Authority, the employees have been paid on city paychecks and so forth. So in any event, Your proposal really was not unexpected. You wanted to assert some independence from the city, and the start is that all the employees at the airport would be viewed as being employed by the airport authority. You would, get your own employer ID number and start issuing your own paychecks. Your proposal, however, carved out sort of an exception for what was then 10 employees. Apparently now there have been some employees have quit working there or whatever, so now it's down to 7. But at the time your request was 10 employees that are participating in the city employee pension plan, and you wanted them to be able to continue with the city employee pension plan. Another part of your proposal was that you wanted to continue getting the assistance of the city's finance department, so they would continue functioning as a fiscal agent for the airport. And similarly, our IT department, we call it the Information Services Department, provides support, but also provides trunk line fiber optic cable to the airport. And you pay for these things and so forth, but they provide support and backup through our sort of mainframe system, if that's the way we call it these days. All those are provided through Information Services. What you did indicate is that in terms of human resources support, the employer support that they provide, the city benefits like the health insurance and so forth would be discontinued. So that's a gist of your proposal. And to start with, I just wanted to provide sort of our analysis and our response to that proposal. First of all, with respect to the pension plan, the pension plan is sort of set by rules and procedures set by law. And the gist of it is that non-city employees are not eligible to be included in the pension plan. And I included in this slide sort of a quote from the city ordinance that says, all persons in the permanent employee of the city of Fargo shall be members of the plan. And the definition of permanent employee means those persons classified by the city as employed in a full-time regular position. Now, that doesn't stop there in our pension plan, several pages of the ordinances regarding that, but as you can imagine, the entire city pension plan contemplates that it affects city employees. So it's when you retire, when you leave the employment of the city if you don't retire. When do you get benefits? Do you vest? All of those things are a function of your starting by being a city employee, and they end when you no longer are a city employee. But as I'll mention here in a little more detail, there are other aspects as well. So again, member contributions are withheld from city paychecks. If you don't have a city paycheck, you now have a different issue than contemplated by the ordinance. Again, retirement benefits begin when you leave the employee of the city. We have some fairly elaborate disability benefits, but also the idea that the city may find an opportunity to re-employ someone who's suffered a disability, and then the suspension of those disability benefits, hopefully to work toward retirement when they can then get retirement benefits. There's a provision in our city pension system that allows for people who are on military training or active duty to get leave, of course, for that service, but also to count those leave periods toward the city employees' period of city service. That's a significant benefit to city employees. So that's a difference, and it doesn't work if you're not a city employee. Then we focused on sort of the idea of sort of the airport being much more independent, I guess, than has occurred for the last 50 years. And where the airport will be independent. It's important to talk a little bit about some history here before we get into the details of this slide. As I alluded to, the Airport Authority was created by a resolution of the City Commission in 1969. There had been some legislation that authorized that some 10 years earlier, I believe. And then shortly after the Airport Authority was created, an agreement was entered into between the city and the Airport Authority. And there was where the Airport Authority obtained the assistance of then the city auditor. And as I understand it, I wasn't working at that time, but as I understand it, the discussion was how much should the airport pay for those services. And I'm told that they thought, well, it'd be about the equivalent of a full-time equivalent staff person in the city auditor's office. We'll round that off at $30,000. And for many years, that was the amount of payment that the airport paid to the city. Sometime thereafter, it was determined that might be falling short and falling behind, and so that was adjusted to $50,000. Now in sort of recent years, and I don't know exactly how many years it's sort of been talked about between the city and the airport, even that $50,000 might be a little short. And in response to that, the airport authority in, I think 2017 was the first year, they selected additional $40,000 over and above the $50,000 in their budget to cover that cost, assuming we'd be able to come to some kind of understanding as to what it should be. And the same for 2018. So now, again, as the airport authority members I think well know, and certainly your executive director know, we're educated that one of the issues you have to contend with as an airport authority is a compliance with Federal Aviation Administration regulations, and in particular, when it comes to using the services of city, the FAA regulations don't really allow a city to charge for services where the city would be deemed to be making a profit. Now, that would be deemed to be sort of a diversion of airport revenues and be inappropriate. And so what the FAA regulations call for is this idea that it's just fine to sort of recoup or repay to the city, if you will, sort of the allocated cost, a pro rata cost of what might be called centralized services, where a department is just providing help to the airport just like it were any other of the 15 or however many departments we have at City Hall. And as long as the sort of financial model is based on a prorated allocation that seems appropriate, that's just fine. So there was concern as to what the number should be, and ultimately our finance director, Kent Costin, kind of dug in and tried to come up with an appropriate allocation of cost and put together a certified itemization for, I think, both 17 and 18. It was submitted to the FAA, and I believe FAA has signed off on it, is my understanding. So we're in pretty good shape there. One thing that happened, though, as a result of this, and I'm going to call on Kent to talk a little bit more about it because he'll be able to explain it far better than I will, but one thing about this dialogue, you might say, that what prompted in our minds was a couple of things. One, even though the city auditor's office and subsequently the city finance office has been providing this assistance for 50 years and kind of getting along, this dialogue has sort of focused attention in the finance department on some things that probably need to be shored up, some policies and procedures that Kent will talk about. So that's one thing that's the case, whether we continue or as is, or continue with an MOU as we'd like to propose. But the other thing that came to light, frankly, was that this only works for the finance department if it truly is centralized. If it truly is that the airport authority works like another department in the city, follows sort of the same policies and so forth. Because the city finance department, very capable people, but not set up to be an outsourced accounting firm that's sort of looking for business from any department that wants accounting support. They're set up for that, and this finance department really isn't.
Can I ask a question real quick? Mr. Costin, how much?
Again, to ask questions if you don't mind, just so we can get through it.
Okay.
I mean, otherwise we're going to be stopped. I'd just like to get the presentation done, and then you're welcome.
Okay.
Can you put that back in your head?
Yeah, I won't forget.
All right. Yeah. So with that, anyway, so those are the two significant realizations that came to us as a result of evaluating all of this. And with that, Kent, you don't have to stand up at the podium. If you're comfortable, you can just provide a little bit of an explanation as to what those accounting policies and procedures are.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and thank you for the ability to comment on these items. The first one, with regard to the cost of services and what we charge you, Eric had a very fine rendition of the history of that, and again, it's a long-standing history of providing quality services to the airport. And I must say that my relationship with the airport authority, and especially with the staff, has been really good. It has not been a strained relationship, and I suspect if you asked Mr. Domerstein, he would confirm that. So I'm feeling really good about that. I was tasked with the ability to dive into the FAA regulations and discern and try to mediate, if you will, this issue about how much to charge the airport for the fair value of the services rendered. Again, over the years, we have installed a multitude of software systems and supported those and enhanced those, and all trying to bring everybody along simultaneous. So what Eric said is about 99% correct. We have been exchanging emails recently within the last month or so where the final sign-off of this cost allocation plan is not completely, it doesn't have a bow on it at this point, but they have conceded that what we're doing is appropriate with regard to the federal regulations. It's okay to allocate overhead cost, which from our perspective means we can take city commission costs, we can take IT costs, we can take finance costs, we can take anything that would be in what they call a cost allocation pool. And the key to successfully having this approved would be simply treat all of our departments and divisions uniformly and fairly, including the airport, with regard to how that cost allocation plan works. So we did that work, we created that plan, and we're within, I've been emailing the district regional office for them to finish this off, if you will. I've had 2 or 3 reminders. It's like I would really like to be done with this. So anyway, I just wanted you to understand what that part meant. The other part with regard to what Eric and what the slides are talked about being centralized is over the years, as we implemented certain of these software systems and routines and subroutines, and I don't want to go into the weeds, but the airport exercised their authority to basically do this how they felt they wanted to do this, I think under the auspices of their authority. So our policies and procedures of the city there's been a departure at the airport, and it's been longstanding, and generally I was aware of it. However, it's just different. In some cases, these examples would be more involved with evaluating internal control. And your control environment up there is a situation where you have a very small staff, very capable staff, but again, it's 3 key business executives handling the money, making the recording of the revenues, and some very basic internal controls that could be enhanced by becoming a little bit more centralized with city operation. So is it working? Yes. Could it be made better? Absolutely. That's our own professional opinion. And some of these are instances where the airport may have departed from our established procedures. There was some cash moved into other investment accounts that moved outside of our normal protocol. The way we record contract obligations and construction contracts, which you have ongoing all the time, is a different protocol. And again, is it working? Yes. Could the internal controls be made better? Absolutely. We're of that opinion. And in some cases, because we've allowed that protocol, the work of our finance staff at the end of the year becomes more, a little bit more hand-holding than what we would do with a normal department because it's not systematized. Another example would be our accounts receivable. You bill and collect a lot of money at the airport, and all of that money flows through the airport office, and they make their deposits, and then they send us a recording of the revenue. If you were to split some of those functions up and have monies come directly to the city, and we would put that money into the accounts, we think that internal controls would be enhanced there as well. And so those are some examples. Now, the other thing that is of a concern, and we've had a very good track record over the years, but when you talk about audit risk, I'm always concerned about audit risk. Federal grant programs all come with a lot of compliance procedures, and everybody is accountable to try to make sure we cover all those compliance procedures. And if, in fact, somebody misses something, you can find yourself in a situation where the auditors have an audit finding, the audit finding gets raised to a level of the federal agency, in this case the FAA, and others that are overseeing the city of Fargo. So because we are so tightly entwined already, we would be of the opinion that opinion that if somebody missed something at the airport and it became a federal audit finding, that there is a risk that some of this could then flow in and negatively impact the city. So we're looking at this in the relationship of how do we prevent that, and how do we, whose policies do we use in an attempt to mitigate that risk? And we would be of the opinion that our City of Fargo policies have been written well, and they've been updated timely, and that the internal control process would be enhanced by simply following our existing policies. So that's a bit of an overview, and be happy at the end to answer more questions.
Answer them at the end then. Go ahead, Eric.
Right. Thanks, Kent. Again, when it comes down to it, between the pension issue and just this idea that of centralized services particularly from the finance department, the agreement proposed by the airport really is not acceptable to the city. It just can't be accepted as written because of those limitations. We would like to make a counter proposal to your proposal. You've seen versions of this before, so there aren't that many alternatives there, but we would very much like the chance to make this presentation to you and give you some explanation and some background behind the reasoning for the proposal, and would like you to consider it. So the proposal is that the airport employees, I guess we'll say, remain employees of the City of Fargo. In other words, that the agreement from 1969 talked about deeming them to be employees, but it'll be the MOU that we would propose would make it clear that they are employees of the City of Fargo. That would simply solve the employee pension plan issue, so that they're city employees, they can remain in the city PERS plan. What we want, the MOU to say, and what the proposal will hand out to you does address, is this idea of the command and reporting structure. The idea would be that even though they're paid by the city employees in all respects, we just have a hierarchy of reporting and command so that the airport authority, it is agreed and not at all disputed as to the authority of the airport authority, their powers to delegate authority to their executive director, and the executive director report to the airport authority. In all respects, the airport authority would be again, the governing body for all the behavior of those employees. We would need to sort of clarify that relationship with City Hall. I mean, if they're city employees, there's city employee policies that affect benefits, vacation, all those kinds of run-of-the-mill things. We would need to clarify those things, identify the policies that clearly the airport authority needs to set that relate to the operations of the airport, and to the extent that the airport authority feels the need to have a particular employee policy that's at variance with our standard run-of-the-mill city employee policies. Those are things that the agreement would clarify as to how those things are handled. Bear in mind, that the police department, for example, obviously it has policies that relate to law enforcement activities. And those are not in the standard city employee policy manual. So that's something we've dealt with before, and it can be clarified through this MOU. One of the things that goes along, of course, with being a city employee is civil service. And that's been an issue that we've been talking about here on this side of the conversation for some time. Jill Manette's been with the city for, we'll just say over a decade. I don't know exactly how long, Jill, but the question has been asked, gee, these are city employees, have we had a civil service proceeding? And during Jill's tenure anyways, we haven't actually had civil service proceedings for disciplinary measures or termination or anything like that. But if they're city employees, they are going to be civil servants, which is a good thing. It's for the protection of employees so that they aren't treated inappropriately in the process of some kind of suspension, discipline, or termination. And so it's just a matter of, through this MOU, clarifying how that might work. In the normal city departments, the department head, you know, the city engineer, the police chief, fire chief, the department head is the appointing authority. They hire and fire, and when they fire and suspend and discipline, those decisions are subject to civil service review and ultimately appealable to the city commission. So that's an issue where the idea would be that the airport authority, at least as to the executive director, would be the appointing authority and would have that power, but it's subject to civil service review. We'd have to figure out the details with respect to employees underneath Sean. I would propose that Sean then be, with respect to all the other airport employees, Sean would be the appointing authority. He'd be the department head, just like in all the other departments at the city. The fire chief, the police chief, city engineer, and so forth is the appointing authority. So those are some issues that would just need to be clarified with respect to command and reporting, but the idea would be to give the airport authority all the benefits of having the executive director and all the employees at the airport be under their command and governance, while still providing what we think are the benefits of staying in-house here, if you will. Again, one of the things that comes along with employment is the work that our HR department does in providing a official sort of pay plan and a process for reviewing that, which Jill's office does quite regularly, on a regular and scheduled basis, to check the marketplace and see that things are competitive and equal in the marketplace. So this next slide talks about the other aspects of this MOU, and in response to your proposal, it doesn't seem like we need to sell you on the value of our finance department or our IT department, but we would like to call attention to, of course, your proposals would offer to discontinue using the Human Resources Department. Were you to go along with our proposal, I mean, we think that there's significant value to the airport authority in staying with the city, having your employees be city employees, because of all the values provided through our Human Resources Department. From the employer's perspective, really a great deal of support being provided by HR, from job postings, pre-placement screening of applicants, background checks, drug screening, whether they need a commercial driver's license or a non-commercial driver's license. The non-commercial driver's license, we even provide drug screening through our own internal health department. Oversight and compliance with all the regulations, and they're getting more and more complicated over time for larger employers, particularly Americans with Disabilities Act, Family Medical Leave Act, Workers' Compensation, of course, which includes both not only just addressing the problem of an injured worker, but also addressing them returning to work and all the things that go along with that and the dialogue that occurs. Equal employment issues. They handled, just the idea of keeping employee files and storing of those files is significant. When it comes to public requests for open records, there's a fair amount of detail and knowledge that's necessary to be implemented by the HR department. They need to know what is a public record and what is confidential and can't be disclosed. And that involves a fair amount of sophistication. Recently, the city's always had training programs, but recently even had a more sophisticated training program called Target, I give us. So Jill could say much more about it than I can. It's something that is very flexible and can be applied to any department and provides a lot of support. Again, they provide compensation analysis and adjustments for market type studies and adjustments, performance review management, and things such as work safety manager services. And we get to the city's health insurance and benefits associated with health insurance. At City Hall, we're very proud that some work was done a few years ago to really drill into the premiums. And the result of that is continued excellent benefits in health insurance through the city, but also significant premium savings. Through the HR's office, we did some comparison to what the city premiums, using the city health insurance, what we think the airport's premiums would be annually, compared to what if the airport used health insurance through the state through ND PERS. We estimate, it's a bit of a broad estimate, we estimate that if the employees stayed city employees and thus had city health insurance, the airport authority would pay $48,000 to $136,000 less on the city of Fargo side than if the airport went to ND PERS for health coverage. And that's just the employer's share. The employee share would be for single coverage $190 more per month with ND PERS. For family coverage, $457 more per month with ND PERS. It's a significant value what the city health coverage provides for its employees and for the taxpayers as well. Another thing that's, I think, noteworthy is the robust aspect of the city's coverage: dental, vision, long-term disability, life insurance, and a flex spending plan, which you don't necessarily find with other insurers, or at least at other employers, I should say. And so, so again, in order to be part of the city employee pension, must be a city employee. Again, we talked about centralized services, and in short, we think that there are significant value to the airport authority and to your employees if you stay with the city and with the city's proposal. So Kent has touched on this, so I don't need to go through this in any detail, but I mean, the idea of our proposal would be in the MOU we would state that we just need to have a discussion about what policies need to be tweaked, particularly with respect to the financial policies, but also with respect to the method by which you will have authority to set policies, but we'll have to have some interactions so we know what they are and we have some dialogue. I don't see that as being a major challenge by any means, but we will need to have a conversation with you about how those policies get developed, and then on an ongoing basis, how we address sort of policy making by the city as to sort of city employee matters and the airport as to airport matters. And certainly in the end, policy is only good if it's complied with, and so we'll need to address the ability to enforce compliance with those policies. So finally, getting back to this issue of centralized services and Kent's work, I think I've already provided most of this slide an explanation as to the idea that the cost allocation must comply with FAA regulations. Kent did the certification. The number that he arrived at as a result of that cost allocation plan for 2017 was $99,355. For 2018, it was $108,358 for the centralized services. And so our MOU, as we propose, includes these numbers. With respect to 2019 and future years, our proposal would simply be we sort of use the same model. Maybe the model needs to get addressed, but we basically mutually agree annually upon the appropriate amount, recognizing that, frankly, it's compliance with FAA regulations that might be the biggest determining factor there. So with that, you have sort of the gist of sort of our response to your proposal and the basic format for our proposal back to you. And with this, we'll move on to the compensation review. Some of you have heard a little bit about it, and Jill will provide the rest.
Mayor, did you want us to be able to ask questions now before this?
I'm trying to get it all so you get everything, and we could do questions if you'd like.
Okay, because my understanding when we met a couple weeks ago that this was not going to be covered. I mean, it's fine, it's going to be covered, but it's a long presentation.
We're not doing the whole, we're doing
You're not doing the whole
short
thing?
version.
Okay,
short version.
sounds good.
And if they want in detail, like Tammy, what you guys got before, we'll be happy to do that. Jill can go into that, but she's not going to give
Oh,
a real long.
no, that's just fine.
Yep.
Before she goes on, can I speak real quick?
What do you like?
Just for 2 minutes.
What?
I got to pick up my son from daycare. Sorry.
Okay.
Pulling up my notes here. So I just want to thank you for having the meeting, first of all. One, the airport authority is not a department, right? It's not a department from the city of Fargo. So if finance or HR is not equipped to cover them because they're not a department, then so be it. The airport authority can move on and do that privately. That's not out of the realm of possibilities. Number two, we're saying that the city employee, or that we can't cover them through insurance and their pension, things like that, because they're not city employees. That's a city ordinance. We can change the city ordinance by a majority vote. That's very simple to do, and I believe it would pass. To be clear, I don't agree with the airport authority on how much you guys want to pay Sean for his compensation. I would vote no against that if I had a vote. I do not have a vote as a city commissioner. So we have three options as a city commission. We can, one, allow you to do what you want to do. Two, replace you as you become eligible to be replaced, which we have been doing. Three, we can replace you completely as an authority and make the city commission the airport authority. I don't agree with that. I want to let you be autonomous, which you are. You can agree or disagree with the compensation package that we have offered you. It's a yes or no vote from you guys. But other than that, I believe this is a power grab on our end. We can either give it to you or not give it to you. You can accept it or not accept it. But I think that you guys need to address this as an authority, which you are. Either accept or deny what we're asking you to do. And beyond that, we have options to replace them or to let you do what you want to do. I'm sorry to jump in the middle of all this, but I do have to pick up my son, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll use that as he had to pick up his son. Excuse, but if we could go ahead, Jill, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So as Eric had indicated, today I want to just briefly cover the compensation review for airport executives. And so last fall, the airport authority submitted a recommendation for compensation for the executive director position, primarily based on the survey conducted by ADK Consulting and Executive Search Firm. Since that time, the airport also participated in another survey that was conducted by Airports Council International, or ACI. And so we have been in the process over the last couple of months of reviewing the results and doing some analysis on those survey results. And so that's what I plan to cover with you briefly this afternoon. So the ACI, Airports Council International, was established back in '91 to represent the interest of airports. And you're likely familiar with this council. They engaged Western Management Group to conduct the survey, and the survey began in 2018, and so they collected the 2018 compensation data, but the survey itself, the results were made available February of 2019. There were 133 airports who participated in the survey, and that's across the entire nation. So this survey gives a good cross-section of airports from the entire country. On this next slide, I just wanted to briefly show a comparison of the ACI, or the Airports Council International, and the previous ADK survey. Again, that ADK survey having been conducted by the executive search firm. And so you can see where there's an X in each of those columns. It's really just showing the overlap of the cities that were included in both surveys. So we have a pretty good cross-section of cities included in both of these surveys. The ACI survey really categorized airports looking at airport size based on traffic units. So the traffic units, as calculated by ACI, is based on passenger and cargo levels. And again, keep in mind we're using 2018 data as collected in the survey. So Hector was included in that smallest small b category, as it's titled by ACI. So you can see the categories. We have the SB, or smallest, being 0 to 999 traffic units. And then you see the breakdown as you progress, the small a, the medium, and then ultimately large airports. Again, the key on this slide to understand is that That traffic unit is based both on passengers as well as cargo levels. So it does encompass both of those indicators. I just wanted to show briefly the cities included and the airports included from the Midwest region. So you can see the name of the airport, and then behind the airport, that airport size distinction. So you see several are in the small B category, you see some in small A, medium, and large. So the Midwest has a good representation of the various sizes of airports. And the next couple of slides really are just intended to show all participants. So again, there were over 133 cities and airports that participated in the survey, and this shows the distinction by size of all of those airports. So just a little bit about methodology. ACI compared the salaries utilizing 9 primary comparisons, and that includes those factors listed below. So the ACI grouped the data based on the region that the airport was located within, the annual revenue, the annual budget, the airport authority headcount, or in other words, the number of regular employees, the total passengers, total cargo. Also looked at the data at when the airports were city-owned as compared to airport authority, so just those different governance types, and then the airport size. And so we looked at all of those factors, but really drew out the top kind of 4 factors that we felt were most relevant and provide the best comparison in terms of size and scope of operation. That being the annual revenue, annual budget, headcount, and airport size. So in looking at these 4 categories, we're really looking at airports from across the entire country that are similarly categorized to Hector. Okay, and now I just I'll cover this first slide in more detail, and then we'll move through a little more quickly. But this just shows one factor, the annual revenue comparison. Fargo falls in the under 25 million category. So the top line represents Fargo data from 2018. And the second line shows that under 25 million category. So that shows there were 51 airports throughout the nation that reported within this category of under 25 million as their operating revenue. And you can see how our minimums compare. So for the city of Fargo, the minimum for our pay grade is $118,102. The under 25 million, so the other 51 airports, their starting rates of pay or minimum of their pay scales averages to be $107,438. So just looking at this one factor, we're able to see that Fargo's minimum is approximately $10,664 above those other 51 airports that fall within this revenue category, and that equates to about 9% above that minimum. As you skip over to the right then, the column under max, our grade 23 maximum is $153,525. The average of the 51 airports that reported within this category is $160,221. So you can see in terms of the maximum or the highest level paid, we are at about just under $7,000 under that average within the market. So that equates to about 4.4% below. And then the average column looks at actual rate of pay. So in actual rate of pay, we're actually very well aligned with that national average, just within 0.3%. The variable cash for performance column, this question on the survey asked participants or asked airports to provide an amount of essentially a bonus if that is offered to airport executive directors within their cities. So of those airports that do offer a bonus or variable cash for performance, the average is $12,629 per year. And then those far right columns show the annual auto allowance and the annual cell phone allowance. So currently the executive director receives $9,600 per year as an auto allowance and $2,400 per year for cell phone allowance. Unfortunately, the survey did not request specific amounts of the cities that were surveyed, so that's why you see an unknown under the survey averages. So that's a look at annual revenue, and we're just going to briefly look at the other three factors for the executive director position before we move on and look at the assistant director. The next factor is the annual budget comparison. Again, Fargo fits in that under 25 million, and you can see there were 55 other airports who reported in this category. So our minimum, we're very well aligned with that national average, being about 12,848 above, or about just under 11% above. The maximum, again, really pretty well aligned there. We're just right in, right below that average maximum throughout the nation. And the actual average, again, you can see we're within 1.4% of that national average. And the far right, again, looking at variable cash for performance and then the allowance. The next factor I want to look at is headcount, and that's a terminology used on the survey. So here we're really just looking at regular employees who are benefited, could be part-time or full-time. We fit into the under 50, and 37 other airports throughout the nation reported in this category. So again, you can see how we align with the national averages. Our starting rate as compared to the average is about 15% above, our max about 4% above, and actual rate of pay about 12% above that national average of those 37 airports. And then the last factor, looking at airport size, and again, you might recall earlier I mentioned that this is one of 4 categories based on traffic units, so it factors in both passengers as well as cargo. And so when you look with the other small b airports, there were 49 airports who reported in this category. You can see our starting rate is about 12.5% above. Our max about 2.4% above, and actual rate of pay just under 6% above. As we look at our current, and again, I mentioned earlier the data from the survey was collected in 2018, but we're comparing on these screens as we look at current actual rate of pay to 2019. So again, as we compare, looking at the size of the airport based on passenger and cargo, we thought probably the best indicator of those 4 primary factors. So comparing with the 49 airports, again, we looked at we're anywhere from 4 to 14% above, depending on where in the range we're looking. And so this information has been reviewed, and a recommendation has been made to implement a market adjustment for the executive director position. That market adjustment would entail moving the executive director position from a grade 23 to a grade 24. That would allow for approximately a 6.3% increase retroactive to January of 2019. With this increase applied, you can see how we would then compare to the region. You would see that our min is actually just under 20% above the average, our max about 10% above, and the average actual, again, comparing to similar size airports throughout the nation, would be about 13.6% above. You can see on the far right, the recommendation is also then to align the auto allowance and cell phone allowance with that of other department heads within the city of Fargo. So shifting to a $900 annual auto allowance and then having a city-issued smartphone for use. And
So
of course,
I just want to comment one thing on that. So I think you need to recognize, I remember when you gave your proposal, we went up to three or something like 10 to 11% over 3 years. This allows a 6.3% increase, and if you do a wage adjustment yearly at 2%, in 2 years you'll be at 10%. So we're similar to what you were going to, just a little different methodology. And in fact, Don Killander had one time asked to go to grade 24 when he came in and talked to us at one time. So I think this is getting us into the market where we need to be. We recognize that Sean with cargo is a little different animal, but the unit values do help us out a little bit there. But Sean with cargo has gone up 5 times. I noticed that, and with our passengers, we're doing very well. So this was vetted. The only thing we didn't have is the airport authority couldn't send a member to the meeting when we had that meeting. So this is again something you can go back, digest as an authority and come back to us on, but go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Mayor. The only other thing I want to point out is that with that shift from allowance to salary, that also increases the dollar amount of that pension contributions are based on, as well as ultimately the monthly benefit amount would be based on that higher level of salary. Also, those future wage adjustments, as they're applied as a percentage, again, with the shift from dollars in allowance to salary, that increases those future wage adjustments or pay plan adjustments.
And then I won't ask you to go through the assistant manager. I want to ask you on him is just go to his current pay and whether the recommendations came out. We can do that later. I think the team is getting fatigued.
Okay. So you want me to move on to the assistant director?
Yeah, assistant director, just go to his
Okay.
current pay and then with the recommendation.
Very good. So we have those same factors laid out here for the assistant director, and when looking at the comparisons, currently the position is in a grade 18, and you can see how we align then with that national market. As we look to the recommendation, again, is comparing to the small b 30 airports across the nation, the recommendation would be to shift to a grade 19. And that shift to a grade 19 would constitute a 5.2% increase. And you can see how then the actual pay is impacted. That would place the actual pay about 16% ahead of the average of small b airports across the nation. The same applies in terms of the allowances, a shift to align with other city department heads. And as well as issuing that smartphone, and this would provide eligibility for future competitive wage and pay plan adjustments. There would be, in the case of the assistant director, one additional step for room for growth as well within this pay grade. And that is all I have.
Thank you. We need to work together to move forward. What I'd like to get out of this is we met today, and I thank you for the time you've had today. It takes a little while to get through all this stuff. So we do want a new memorandum of understanding between the two organizations. I think we need to move forward on that in particular. We'd like to have the payment and recruitment of the city for the value of the support and services. So the past things that haven't been paid, I'd like to get that done. I'd have Kent send emails, whatever. I think the authority is prepared to pay for that. Administration and compensation in conformity to the city's official pay plan, that's what we've looked at. That's been part of a source of many of our arguments. But if we're going to be City of Fargo employees, we try to keep in with the city's official pay plan. I think we've taken a real hard look at this. We had good data. You guys actually gave us the data. We went into your survey, and I think we've got good factors in regards to that. Some of the areas which I think we do have to talk about is the rights and privileges of employees. You get a little lost a little bit about if there's an employee in your business that in the airport that's bullied or something goes on, what is a recourse? Who can they go to and how do they do that? if Sean B is the upper superior at that point, who else can they pop out, and can they go to HR, and how do we handle that? And if we do find some evidence of something going on, who do we bring it back to, and how do we handle that? That's what I think takes a mutual discussion, because you have to give people the civil rights and make sure we don't get into any issues, discrimination or any other issues that might happen. Reporting hierarchy is just that you are an authority, and you have the authority to do many things. You know that, and you need to run a good airport, and that's what you're doing. Just a command and reporting structure. Can Sean work with the team? Can we work together to make sure things go smoothly between the two organizations? When your staff gets overwhelmed with snow removal, is there a way we can sometimes help out as the City of Fargo? City of Fargo recently did a pay increase for the firefighters. What do we do with the firefighters at the airport? We need to address that. So it's trying to do those things. And I just think policies in finance and airport operations, they do not want an audit of the airport finances if we're not quite doing everything the way we should. And I think it's important to do that right. We got caught the other day on the winter thing, and I talked to you about it when you talked to me, is that, okay, our employees were working, and as a commission, we said, okay, we'll give 8 hours of vacation times for the people, the patrolmen, the firemen, the people that worked, tried to be fair. And then in the airport authority, that was stopped. So we don't need those conflicts. I mean, either we're handling the policies one way or the other. Would like to see a policy book that's matched up. There may be things in the airport that are different, and I think those policies should be written up for safety concerns or different things. You have airplanes are different animals than cars. But we have a handbook that we give our employees, but do we match up, and should we match up in some areas, or there's some areas in your area that require more safety? That part I don't know. All I'm saying is I like to see stuff written, because making the assumption and a lawsuit happens and you said, well, where's this book, and we can't find it or it's not present. Don't know any of that data, but that's the areas I think still have to be discussed. City desires a finalization of the MOU by August 1st. So yeah, it seems like we've been kind of taking a long time to do this, but heard your concerns, studied your concerns, took a while to get everything done that we had to done. We finally got it all done. I know where the contention is, and in some ways, are the City of Fargo employees or not? You as an authority have to decide what you want to do on that and where you want to land on the MOU. But we would now open it up for discussion and questions if you want to ask now, and you have a meeting tomorrow, you can talk about things as well, but any of these people, you can ask any questions. So Eric, you were the first one, I think, that had a question.
I just said, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. So I was just looking at some of the stuff and the data that we were looking at when you're comparing apples to apples. Some of this stuff is very flawed because you're comparing Fargo to, you're putting us in a class that has 0 to almost 1 million, right? One less than 1 million. So St. Cloud was one of your comparable cities. Williston, Bemidji, Grand Forks. St. Cloud doesn't have any cargo operations at all. They have one carrier. Williston has one carrier. They have 0 cargo. Bemidji doesn't have any of those things. Grand Forks lost all of their cargo. They have one carrier that comes in there. St. Paul Municipal Airport has 0 cargo operations, and it has 0 passenger service. So you could have 0 and you could still fall in the same category as we do, or you could have 1 million and it's just not really apples to apples. So in a kind of a comparison, the UND football coach is a Division I football coach, and the NDSU football coach is also a Division I football coach. Do they deserve the same salary? Are they the same caliber? And I would say no. And so you have to compare apples with apples. And so when you lump all of us in with much smaller airports, you get apples to oranges, is what I'm saying. So we are a little special, and Sean does a fantastic job, and he does the job of several people that would be at like a Sioux Falls or something like that, where they have somebody who does the passenger service, and then they have somebody who does the cargo service. And they don't always, we would have to hire 2 people to do that job while they're hiring 2, and we have 1 person doing that job. So I was gonna ask one more question. The airport authority is not a department within the city. Do you charge the HR department for their services that they render from the city? Do you charge the other departments within the city to use the city finance and the IT and stuff like that, do you guys charge them
In effect, we do, yes. I
in
mean,
effect, or do you bill them?
we don't bill it out because we'd be billing ourselves.
Right.
So
So why are we billing the airport authority if
Because
you're
you have
going to
a-
lump us in and be city employees and the city everything? Why are we paying for that stuff when your other departments are not?
Well, you have a different source of revenues.
We're all the same team though, yes? If we effectively
If I
lump
can have your revenue, I'm happy with that. I'll take your revenue and I won't charge you a thing. That's the difference, Eric.
That's
is that, say,
illegal, of course.
Joe doesn't have any way of making revenue. You have a way of making revenue. You're being charged for revenue you make. Do you want to answer his question about the airports?
Sure.
His question about different sizes?
Yes, so, that, I understand the question, and that is common within compensation surveys, that you have categories that have a range. So I understand what you're saying. There are some airports that fit on the low end of that range, but there are also some airports that fit on the high end of that range. And so with each of these factors, and that's just a matter of how the ACI laid out the survey, that's common to compensation surveys, that you find the best category that you fit within. And so we didn't just look at the one factor. That was also important to look at several factors. So if there are much smaller airports, for example, within the airport size, then we wanted to look at it in terms of comparing revenue, comparing overall budget, comparing headcount, the number of employees that fall within that, under that airport, as well as regular employees.
I
So,
think, Tammy, you said you're 754 units or something? 750,000 units?
Oh, and that's what I was going to bring up. When you look at the count, when you actually look at the data, we have 2 million, isn't it 2 million pounds at our airport? It's an amazing number, but that's counted, our flights, I'm not the expert, but our planes are big. But if you've got one plane, that's counted once. Doesn't matter how many poundages it is.
And that's only since November, since
Yeah.
we've had the large aircraft in here. So those numbers are skewed. Also, if you're taking all the way back from 2018, that's not going to count January through October. Those numbers are basically garbage because those don't count, right? We got UPS here in November. And so moving forward, November through today, those numbers would be far more accurate than anything from January through October of
I think in
2000.
Frady's we saw it go from 50 tons to 254,000 tons. We looked at somewhere, they showed it, yeah.
And it's the movements at night. We have more operations at night than we do during the day right now. And that is because of all the cargo has gone up. And because we have so many movements at night, Sean is now on call 24 hours a day. And so we also have had to hire additional employees to keep the runway clear during the nighttime that we usually didn't have to do before UPS showed up. So we're in a state of flux right now, and we're growing, and we have to build because our snow removal facility is too small and so forth, and we have to hire new people and so forth. So because we're looking at old data doesn't necessarily forecast forward and say those numbers now meet today's standard. So when you look at this, and when we looked at our compensation survey, we looked at old data, and Sean was underpaid at that point. And now when you look at what we expect of him now, those numbers are dwarfed in comparison to what he's getting. So that's all I was going to say. Do you have anything else you want to say, sir?
Yeah, I want to jump in here with a couple of things. First of all, I'm happy to hear, Mr. Mayor, you're talking about writing it down, having a hard copy. So if we go back and start looking at how did we get an airport authority in 1969, we have the copy of what your predecessors signed. So there's what we started with. Then we also have the law, the state statute that governs us. Now, we in the airport authority are not going to violate the law, just like today when we put out an open records meeting for this meeting. We're not going to violate the law. And in 20606, it states specifically that each authority may employ an executive director, secretary, technical experts, employees, permanent, temporary, and may require and shall shall is a big word for lawyers, correct? And shall determine their duties, their qualifications, and compensation. It doesn't say as per the city, or as per the HR department, or as per review. I'm just reading the law.
I'm not debating that.
Okay.
An MOU means it defines that relationship. So when you do an MOU, it just redefines the relationship. We've been acting as your as City of Fargo employees for 50 years. And that compensation, you've come to us frequently to the compensation committee, recommend a compensation for Sean, and that has been done if I go back to his records, frequently the airport authorities come to us with those requests. And sometimes they've been given and sometimes they've not. We're just saying, going forward, make this simple, follow the rules of City of Fargo employees, we're fine. That's what the MOU is defining. We're not trying to redefine your authority.
Well, I'm just trying to.
I know, it says shall, and there's different
straight.
arrangements you can make, and you can make arrangements with the team and work together to try to work it out, and that's what I'm saying I think we need to do.
And I believe
You bring up valid points, maybe we need to relook at that on the freightage issue. I don't have any debate with that. I mean,
You know, and I just looked up the freight. It's, in 2017, we had 248 million pounds. In 2018, 275 million pounds. So
a lot of freight.
A lot of freight.
So back to airport employees, and Jill, when we met before, you mentioned that the park system is a political subdivision, and that they still have different rules than we do, but we are also a political subdivision according to the statute. So I also look at, we went from 27 or 28 employees. We're now in the retirement system down to 10, 9 of which are working. One is a surviving spouse. So we have diminished the amount of work in the retirement system by 2/3, but yet our costs have gone from 30,000 to 50,000 to now 90,000. But yet our number of, quote, employees has gone down. And so I know that the FAA this last time had a little bit of a difficulty in approving the 90,000, but they did. So, you know, we're paying it. The health insurance, I know the figures you put up, and the health insurance goes up and down all the time. But I will tell you right now, well, goes up, doesn't go down. That I know a state aeronautics association is trying to get a group, and if they do that, for instance, Grand Forks, they have no relationship with the city and their airport authority, and they're looking at having a discounted health association policy for that group. So that's just.
It's just hard in health insurance to beat anything that has 1,000 employees. It's just, I mean, you can try different things. You got to have size, and size really helps. You can discount a healthcare service, have bigger deductibles, do a variety of different things. I won't argue that. Tammy's talked about this. You guys go out and buy your health insurance. It's just going to cost you more. I mean, if you go out and you don't get your own services, all the surveys we looked at, the airport authority on its own costs more money to the municipality, and that's what we saw. Rick?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I got a question. When's the last time we had an audit done? And I think, and maybe Kent, maybe you know, but I think we need.
Yeah, no, I do. The City of Fargo and the Airport Authority are audited annually with regard to a financial audit, and all of our federal grants are audited in compliance with the federal regulations, and they're audited annually. So we're certainly keeping up on both facets of that for the city operation.
We're audited a lot more than annually. Here's the list of oversight. And there are, Ide Bailey did this year a 561 operations, a maintenance account 563, a 569 improvement accounts, the FAA AIP program, that we did a 564 passenger facility change program.
I guess the area that I would be the concern that I'd like to see an audit done is the parking revenue. And maybe that's already been done, maybe that's on the list, but if it is, that's good. But I think that would be very important. And and it might be that this has already been done, but I just think an overall audit would be a good thing, and maybe an overall one has been done.
In all of the surveys I've seen, and I don't discount any of the numbers, I didn't hear anything about airbase alignment with airports. I heard nothing about that. You're talking about airports across the country. How many of them have air missions attached to them? And how many of them have to have a relationship with their airport authority or the person running the airport, the executive director? Do we know that? Because if we don't, these numbers are BS.
So I can just answer a portion of that the survey, again, conducted by ACI, and they develop the survey so they determine what data will be collected. I'm not aware of a question related to that relationship.
I would go back and find that out because it's a whole different breed of animal than just an airport with inbound and outbound. You've got a military component to it.
But the trouble with our military, though, you have drones. You don't have the jets coming in and out.
I'd say they're military. So
It's just a drone missionary right now, though, right? We don't have the happy hooligans driving jets in and out.
There's still 1,000 people on the base, though.
They still what?
There's still 1,000 people on the base, and we do flight operations daily.
Sean doesn't run those 1,000 people.
He doesn't, but he's
it's
still
a
has
He has,
Oh,
he has to do the
He's the
leasing.
Port Authority Director, so yes, I'm glad we have a base on base, but the
I'm not talking
service
about.
takes care of itself, doesn't it?
I'm not talking about Sean right now. I'm just talking about in general. We also have, just like you said, we also have that component to the airport as well. So
for
And
the
just
purpose
help
of
me
a survey, I'd
understand-
ask.
Then help me understand what complexity that adds to his job.
It is the Air National Guard has leases through the Air Force, state land, which is leased by the city of the municipal airport authority to the state, and that's a federal lease, which is a different lease than the Army National Guard. The Army National Guard is a state lease, and they operate with different personnel, so there's different requirements for each one. So right
Could you help me
now,
understand in Sean's day-to-day operations how that affects
Yes, he
him,
does.
or what interaction he has?
he does. He has an interaction with the federal leasing agent as well.
I don't
as-
doubt that, but on a day-to-day operation, what does Sean have to do with
Not day to day, but it's
function
still,
of the Air Guard?
a complexity of the job.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, my question is, the survey did not address that, and it's a component of the Hector International Airport. And so if it was a component of it, why wasn't it filtered in the survey with those other participating airports? It hasn't been brought up. I think the numbers are skewed if it isn't.
Yep. Any other questions?
Mr. Costin.
I'd like to just make a comment. I think if you look at audits and financial oversight, probably General Haugen has a list, but probably the airport has more financial oversight from a greater number of entities, all the way from the federal government to banks and auditors in Fargo. And we have a complete audit every year. We get a report of that. And I have, anytime there's been a concern, and that's very few and very minor, they are addressed. So to assume that there is not financial oversight is a mistake. The other thing I'd
I
say,
think on that,
wait,
Virginia,
the
he
other
wasn't
thing,
commenting
just
to finan-
excuse me. The other thing I'd say is you need to look at policies related to how airports can put, where they can put their money. And my understanding, and maybe it's changed, is it cannot be commingled. There are several kinds of funds we have, and we can't just lift money we have and put it into the city coffers. It has to be kept separate, it has to be accounted for separately, and that is taken care of at the airport. So there are some rules that have to be considered. It's not just a matter of put it all together.
And I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I do know you have a lot of oversight. I think Commissioner Pipcorn was more concerned about parking revenue and what happens in that area. I think the oversight the airport has always had, because we have federal grants and FAA, is always outstanding. They've done a great job.
I was just going to say, Mr. Costin, you had said one of the things that you would like to see would be to bring our bookkeeping into the city so that you guys can take care of it, and that was to mitigate audit risk. And I was just going to say, just like you said, we do get audited every year, and has it been a problem in the past where anything has been handled incorrectly or looked unfavorably on the city? Has that been a problem before?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we have to audit it. What I was trying to portray was we have city policies and procedures and accounting guidelines, and in some cases, the airport authority has chosen to depart from them. It's just simply not the same, and it's a different set of controls. So if you've gone away from properly developed internal controls, then your risk profile is higher. And what I'm saying, I think I did reiterate that we've had audits. We've had very good success. The city for the last 25 years has had a clean record, and I think the airports authorities has been very well done as well. But my point is simply, how are the internal controls designed? And if you're passing $5 to $6, $7, $8 million through the airport authority, and there's 3 people handling the cash, or there's a very small, finite group of people doing the transactions, then spreading it out would make a more effective internal control.
We
Eric,
see those
I trust the people
transactions
you
at
have.
every meeting.
Oh, I don't
Pardon
have
me?
any problem with the people you have out there at all. When we talked about this at the beginning, we got to think if you and I aren't here and if somebody else is here, are we following standard practices that are safe for the group? Let's just look at it. If there's a better way of doing it, let's talk about it. I'm not saying that everything should just come to the city. Let's just figure out what the best way of handling that. When you have 3 people handling millions of dollars, and like you say, you guys are getting bigger and bigger, there's a lot of money going through the airport, and you'd rather not have the temptation or something to happen. Is there better controls? Let's look at them. But you would agree that if we had things that made it even more safe for your environment out there, it would probably be better. And I'm just saying, if you have your accountant or accountant look at it and say, is there any way we can do this better that helps protect the airport?
Okay.
So Mr. Mayor, can I ask, what's our marching orders? What's the plan from here? How does this
I think I
proceed?
cut off Tammy. She was
Oh,
saying.
I just said we see those transactions at every meeting, and we look at them, we question them if they're out of normal, and so we do, we watch them. And yes, there probably could be improvements, but we haven't, I think it's been pretty crystal clear what's going on financially. So, thanks.
I'm just a lawyer, but I would like to say, I mean, the oversight that the airport has is the FAA, and they're dot your I's, cross your T's, and that's just something that it's very specific, the guidelines that we have to follow out there, and I think they do a fantastic job out there of that. Everything has to go through the FAA.
Jim?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. My name is Jim Sweeney, and I'm a tenant and frequent attender attending the meetings of the Municipal Airport Authority of the City of Fargo. So I just want to, sitting here, I've taken a couple notes. I've got a couple questions and maybe just a couple of comments that I can leave you with today. And the first question I've got, and just to give you a perspective for those that I don't know, been attending Fargo Airport Authority meetings for 26 years, and I believe that I would be the most frequent attender of those meetings, attendee, of those meetings. So quite familiar with the history of the operation of the Airport Authority. And first of all, today I'm a little bit confused about who was invited to this meeting. I certainly saw it, the reason I'm here is because I saw the public notice that the Municipal Airport Authority was meeting here at 5 o'clock, but were the other city commissioners invited to this meeting?
Jim, if we want to get into arguments, who was invited, then I'm not going to invite your comments, okay? We invited everybody. This is a public meeting. We had to meet with the Airport Authority and talk to them about the MOU. Dave is the liaison.
I just
I'm
asked
the
a
mayor,
question.
and you saw Gary come in. We weren't meeting commission to commission. I've been authorized by the commission to negotiate with the Airport Authority this MOU. So that's my job. This is a discussion of the MOU with them, and it has to be public because all 5 of their members are here.
Thank you.
So that's what happened there. There's not a debate, and there was some confusion about who could come or who couldn't, and we invited Sean if he would have wanted to come. It was decided with Stacy Dono that didn't need to happen, and this is the first time the Airport Authority has seen this MOU. So unless you have something that's relevant to the discussion now, I'm going to cut you off.
Mr. Mayor, I simply just asked a question about who was invited. I
Doesn't need to
wasn't
be
trying to
asked.
argue with anyone.
Doesn't need to be asked.
So can I ask my question again? So what's the way forward? So is the airport authority now going to come back with a counter proposal? Is that the vision? Or how is that, what's the plan?
So you're even given an MOU tonight, a letter from our attorney as well, addresses the issues that you've had before. I'd like to sign an MOU August 1st. So you have an opportunity to resolve it. Eric had some questions on compensation that can be discussed, and Tammy knows the same, can be discussed with Joe. We have a recommendation to the City Commission in regards to that salary comp issue. The money that you should exchange as far as our services, I think Kent's going to send something back to the FAA, and I think you just would approve that as a commission regardless of these discussions, because we've come to a fair agreement that we both agreed if FAA approved it, it would be okay to pay us.
You know, as this is a joint meeting, I would like to hear your comments. I mean, is that okay, Mayor? Because I didn't take it
I
offensively.
want to know the relevance of his comments.
Right. No, I would too. I really
What are the
do.
relevance of his comments? You guys are making the decision. Jim is a renter out there, right?
Pardon?
Jim is a renter out there. He also has lobbied for your position, so I think he's a biased renter out there as well.
He's lobbied for our positions?
He did. Came to the mayor's office and lobbied for his position. So to me, it's what you 5 members decide what you want to do. Jim can make comments, but this is not the appropriate time. This was a discussion with the airport authority on the MOU. Opinion, right or wrong, with your for it or against it, Jim, it's not relevant to this discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a couple questions, comments that were made today. Can I continue?
With her grace, I would do it, yeah.
On the HR, perhaps I missed it at the beginning, but you showed a lot of data from ACI, and you mentioned the other data set. Did you include the other data set in your analysis?
So, Mr. Chairman, so this is not a cross-examination. So now you're going to have the opportunity to come back with a proposal, and that's the plan. This isn't now cross-examination. So if that makes sense to you, that's what I think we should do, because I think we've spent enough time. Doesn't that make sense?
It's been a long afternoon, and Jim, I appreciate you have some questions. Maybe you can ask Jill separately, or team can team them up for you and ask the questions, but it's not really relevant to discussion right now.
Well, I would like to hear what he has to say.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll adjourn the meeting. You guys can talk to Jim if you'd like. And Jim has access to all 5 of you. I know that from before.
And for the record, Mr. Mayor, I was not lobbying for the airport's, any position of the airport authority. When I met with you and requested a meeting with Commissioner Pepcorn, which he's never responded, I'm not a lobbyist for the airport authority by any means. I've had signed leases on 5 different airports in the United States.
You came
This
with
is
2
one of
members
them.
from the chamber, and you lobbied for a certain salary for somebody, and you lobbied for a certain MOU. So don't tell me you didn't come to my office and talk to me, Jim. You did.
I did not
And
lobby
it's
for
unfair
any
for
salary.
you. No, you did lobby for a salary, and Sean.
Well,
So
there were other people in that meeting. I'm sure they would attest correctly. Thank you.
So once again, are we clear on what the plan is going forward, that there will be a counter proposal and hopefully be good back and forth, what things work, what things you'd like to change? Does that make sense? No response or any response, or doesn't that?
Yes,
Yes, we understand.
we will take this, digest it, and come back. But again, we will follow the law.
I don't think anybody's not following the law here, General.
Well,
I would pull that as a comment I wouldn't make. We're trying to do an MOU, which we've been trying to do for a while, and this is something both of us need to do. And if we're going to work as a team together, we're not trying to follow the law. We're trying to follow the law.
so if we make an MOU that is contrary to 20606,
But 20619 addresses exactly what's been happening for the last 50 years, which is the airport authority can ask for assistance from the city, and the city is authorized to provide that assistance, including financial services, and they can come to an agreement regarding all of that. And that's what we're talking about here. It is absolutely clear that you are authorized and you may employ the executive director, and you are. And when you do employ him, you probably shall decide their salary. But the issue is whether you want to employ the executive director. And we've had this issue sort of percolating, are the airport employees city employees or airport employees? What are they? Well, the reality is, I mean, we can each have a difference of opinion about it, but the reality is, we need to decide. And that's sort of what this conversation, how it got started, and that's really where we're still at.
So what would you classify employees that are not in the retirement system? The 2/3 that are not in the city retirement system, are they city employees?
They still get paid by, on city paychecks. They're still, all of their benefits are on city accounts.
But they're not in the retirement system, that's all.
Any PERS, the city of
Not
Fargo
paid
employees
for
can be.
from city funds. They're paid for from airport funds,
Right.
which are reimbursed
Yep.
to the city.
Yep.
So it doesn't come out of $1 out of the city taxpayer money.
I'm perfectly willing to agree. It's not as clear as person seated to my left. No question, city employee. There's no argument that she isn't. There are some unique features to this, and the question becomes, who are the city employees? We have an agreement that's been in place. We just discovered within the last 6 months that agreement was extended, that 10-year term of the agreement was extended. None of that is really in dispute. But again, it's just a matter of it needs to be resolved.
On the pension issue, we used to have a City of Fargo pension plan. Now everybody's any PERS, but we still have that City of Fargo pension plan that people are still part of. The advantage for Sean in being part of that pension plan, it has different differentiators as how much pension he draws when he retires. So there's an advantage for him to stay in the City of Fargo pension plan versus going in any PERS. But presently now, any City of Fargo that is employed is the any PERS plan. So just like you've adopted any pension plan, we have to pay out that plan until those members die, and then it's gone.
But it's
And then
also,
the airport pays it.
And that is funded from airport money. It's not funded from city money. And I just, since it's a public meeting and it's going to be recorded and played back, I just want to make sure that everybody understands Sean's compensation, although in the city retirement fund is not paid for from city funds. It is paid for from airport funds. His salary, every single person at the airport is in the same boat. So this is not on the backs of the city taxpayers. This is on the passengers and the cargo and the tenants who use the airport.
Although you do have a 2 mil levy that the airport has, and
Which
you
we
can
do,
utilize that.
which we use
you can
for
utilize
parking
that
lots
funding
and
forever,
infrastructure. It is
however you
not
need to
used for
do.
personal finances whatsoever. So just so everybody understands, that 2 mil levy is used for infrastructure only.
Not to propel the argument any further, but just as a data point, to the point of the little bit of gray area we're dealing with. So when your current executive director was hired in late 1996, early 1997, the Municipal Airport Authority made the direction to employ him, and it went in front of the Fargo City Commission, and they approved the hire. I mean, I'm not trying to make a big deal out of that. I'm just saying there's been a long-standing history where there's this relationship. Whatever it is and whatever the people involved at the time thought or didn't think, I don't know. Can't read their minds, and a lot of them aren't here any longer. So, but, I mean, there's just all kinds of history here where they were employees. Well, you can go back to the agreement and say, well, it said they're supposed to be deemed to be employees for purposes of the pension plan. But it became a lot more than that. And, to be honest, that was 50 years ago. Times were a lot simpler back then. Things have become a lot more complicated. Both the finance department's become hugely more complicated. HR, hugely more complicated. Didn't even have IT in 1969. So I mean, that's just sort of what we're dealing with. And again, it's just, to me, anyways, my own personal feeling is it's just been needing some kind of clarity regardless of the outcome. That's sort of the position I take on it.
Mr. Mayor, we could maybe agree on something before we end. I think we would hope that the city will help us participate in any bonding or anything we do and use the finance department for that. The city's done a great job of that. So I think if we end on something we agree on.
And I agree we need to address this because as a new member of the airport authority, when I looked at all the original documents and then I looked at the state statute, looking at a document that's 50 years old, and I'm questioning, I'm like, well, this expired. And as we know, it's still intact because it's been extended once. And so I do think that this is something we just need to address. We really do.
Very good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.